We're going to start the meeting now. A couple of our people are not here because they're having special meeting and they can't attend. One of the United people is supposed to come in shortly, so we'll see what happens. And in any event, I believe you're going to be very pleased with this report. I know you probably haven't had a chance to read it, but when you do read it, you'll see we've had a lot of questions and requests and specific things that were pointed out, and these have been addressed. We're also going to have a special meeting at the end of the month, as promised. By that time, we will have had chance, after the fur people come in, we're going to be able to get more responses and so forth and so on. And I'll tell you, this is, some of our people have already read it, and they are very impressed with it, and so am I. This was a good report, and it will answer some of the questions and some of the concerns, and it points out how and why. That's the important part. So when you get a chance, please read it, and you'll be hearing about it anyway. Okay, we'll call us to order, and then we're going to acknowledge the media. Is the media here? How about the approval of the agenda from the committee members?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
All right. Approval of meeting report from August the 7th, which again was a good report. Okay. And I've already made my remarks on this, and again, I'm very pleased with this report, and it's going to really give some good answers to what's going on and so forth and so on. Do we have any members' comments that are not on the agenda? Please step forward.
The secretaries need
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
secretaries need to call back.
Oh, I see, yeah. Yeah, there are people who put their...
Larry Irion, 6820.
Thank you. I understand that we're looking forward to seeing what's on this new plan, and I think most of what I am going to say I've already talked to Chris about.
His mic is not on.
You want me to talk louder? I can talk louder.
Maybe
Yeah,
close-
it's
maybe
on now.
closer
You
to
have
the
to turn
mic.
your hearing aids up.
Huh?
Maybe a little closer to the mic.
Okay. Is that better?
It is a little better.
You can hear me now? Most of what I'm going to say I've already talked to Chris about, because it's something of very good concern to me. And I don't know whether you or any of the members of the board are aware of it, but a lot of the dispatchers need to be aware of how far Gate 4 is from State Road, how far Clubhouse 1 is from Big Lots, and how long it takes to get there. Because they don't seem to have a clue when people call for a ride, on Plan a Ride, that where these things are and how long it's going to take to get there, it just doesn't seem to make any sense to them. And then the software, which you've been talking about for 2 years and has never been replaced, comes back with confirmations on Plan a Ride twice. Same bus, same time, same place, 2 different buses. Now, if that's true, then there's somebody that's getting shortchanged, because if both of those buses come to the same place at the same time, where they're only going to be needed once. So the software is one of the big things, but also the people up there need to know how far it is from this to that, what church is this and that. They need to know the territory. As it said in the old Music Man, you got to know the territory. And if they don't know the territory, they can't help us. The other thing, I hope that since you've made the meeting longer, that you've made arrangements for those of us that are reliant on the bus to be able to get home today. And then by the time the meeting is over, all of the buses will be back in the barn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue Ellen Zima.
Hi. I've been riding the buses for many years. The Plan a Ride bus used to come into the cul-de-sacs at night. And that was particularly helpful if you were carrying groceries home from the grocery store. Now the bus drivers tell me they're not allowed to come into the cul-de-sacs at night. Why?
That note's being taken, thank you. Anyone?
David K.
I'm blind, so I don't get a chance to read the report that you're very excited about. Would it take long to read what's on the report? Because I may be saying things that I've already fixed.
Actually, a lot of this will be discussed. That's the reason for the report, the paperwork here. It will be discussed and brought forth. But again, I would suggest that you have someone assist you if you can after the meeting to be able to help you to be able to read all of the information, even though you will have heard it here. There's going to be a tremendous amount of information put out. Okay, sir?
Okay.
You have a question over here.
I have a question. We had asked staff to try to record this at a later date. Is it being recorded?
Yes, it is.
And he would be able to get that audio recording at a later date if he wishes.
That's true, but it may be 2 weeks before it's put out.
That's
because
fine.
it has to be scheduled.
As long
But
as
in
he
the
knows
meantime,
there's an option.
If there's someone that's with him that can read this information, even though we'll be talking about it, all of these items will be addressed today. And then that's what will be giving people time to go ahead and reconsider, do other things about it, okay? And believe me, we're taking notes here, so anybody else, please?
Shirley Niederkorn.
Why don't we wait till the end of the presentation, and these people may be asking stuff that's already going to be in the report.
Well, this is why we said if it's not on the report, if it is, we'll certainly do something about it. It's not going to take that long, so there's only 2 or 3 people going to be talking.
I just wanted to address the board something that happened this morning. I got on the bus, it was going the wrong way. There was a big brouhaha, Clubhouse 1. So the driver left me off over at CVS. I was going down past Aldi's, and I thought, well, it's a nice morning. Maybe I can make it. And it took me 35 minutes, but I was only 5 minutes late when I got, and I had a good walk at the same time. So sometimes what looks bad turns out good. So we just have to think about it like that at times. But there has been some problems with the bus drivers with transferring people and so forth, because a lot of people don't know which bus they want to go to. I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sheriff.
There are no more speakers.
Okay. Any comments from the committee as to what was brought forth? Responses? Judith?
To Mr. Larry Arion, when you call the telephone staff, they have available to them a schedule, and the schedule tells you at what time they stop at each stop. So if you ask them, all they have to do is look at that schedule. You can get one for yourself right here outside the door at that information desk, and they could figure out, at what time it picks up at one stop and what time it gets to Trader Joe's or something like that. And they'd be able to tell you that. So just remind them to look at that schedule, the bus schedule. You can also, like I said, get one for yourself, and then you'll have that information after the meeting. You just go out front.
Anyone else?
I'd like Francisco to address the issue on the cul-de-sac and going into the cul-de-sacs.
Please.
Okay, on that remark, seems like there is some cul-de-sacs that we are not able to reach and turn around inside in the dark. It has been a lot of incidents, so we have to go inside and check out depending what cul-de-sacs are the ones in question. So there is few that we go in there, but there is cul-de-sacs that there is not a turnaround, so it's very difficult for the driver to go in, drop off people, and come back out. So for that reason.
But that's not true in my cul-de-sac. So,
the cul-de-sacs that there are challenges, and perhaps we can put that information out as to what cul-de-sacs cannot be assessed from this point on.
That would help if they say that.
That's why we have the meeting, you've made a request, or it's been written down, you listen to it, we'll see what we can do now, okay?
Right, sorry. Okay, so in the past, the drivers have told us that the drivers drive a different bus from time to time. They don't always drive the same bus. Some are longer, some are shorter. And that it's at the discretion in the past, I don't know what they're doing today, that it was at the discretion of the driver. He knows that bus, if he could get it in or out of that particular cul-de-sac, depending on what bus he's driving that day and the size of that bus. So one day, someone will probably drop you off because maybe you're in a shorter bus, and the driver knows that bus, and the next day, it might be a different driver, different bus, and so it may seem inconsistent, but I don't know if that's the way it is today.
Today, nowadays, the buses are a little bit shorter, so it's just a matter of going in there and check out, because the length of the bus is probably about 5 or 6 feet shorter, so it might be something that we can do. So it depends also the type of the service. On the fixed route is challenging, but on the planner ride, we have time to play, so we have the room to adjust to the condition.
See, this is exactly why these questions are brought up. Staff then can look into it and get the answers that you need, and that will be addressed. And like I said, we're going to have another meeting at the end of the month, which will also cover a lot of what's going on now and from what the report is as to what else we might need to do or can do.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep this rather brief because I know we all want to hear from Fair and Peers on their final recommendations. Just want to highlight a couple things on my report. We did notice for the month of August, our ridership did go down pretty dramatically in August. We're trying to determine what the heck happened in August that would have caused it to go down. I thought it might be the heat, but then I looked at last August and it wasn't that bad. So I think some of it might, at least on the planner ride side, might have to do is we've been having some major telephone issues that, yes, we are aware of. We are working with IT to get those corrected. But we did know in August there was a major decline in ridership. Not exactly sure why, because it really doesn't match historical patterns, but it's something that was a little bit of an eye-opener. The other thing I just wanted to address was I am looking at calling a special meeting for the MMV. I believe it's the 29th of this month. The purpose of that meeting will be to take what Fair and Peers shares today as their recommendations, receive input from the committee and the residents, and then come back with staff's formal recommendations on what the direction we're going to take the program. So that'll be kind of my shot to respond to the recommendations made by Fair and Peers, let you and update you on a few other things that we've been working on to improve the bus system for the residents of the village.
Addressing most of that stuff, so there's no reason to go into new bus update or phone calls, et cetera. Okay, items for discussion and consideration, transportation study final report by Fairs and Peers, and that's what we'll be doing now.
I'd like to introduce, as most of you already know, Jeremiah. Most of you already know him. First of all, congratulations to Jeremiah. He just became a dad about a month or so ago. So, a couple weeks ago. So very excited for him, and congratulations. I invited Jeremiah just to come up here because I thought it'd be easier for you guys to see him instead of you guys looking at his back and stuff. You can see his face. Jeremiah and his company put a lot of work into this report. I think they did a great job, and now we're here to kind of get the final recommendations from him. And with that, I'll let Jeremiah do the talking. He does have a PowerPoint presentation that he'll be going through. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for having me. It's good to be here again, and I know this has been a long time in the making, so I appreciate that everybody's been checking in with us and providing feedback and ideas throughout the process. It's been helpful to get to know everyone and get to know the community better, to refine our recommendations. And part of the reason why it's taken a little bit of extra time is that we wanted to make sure that the route proposal that I leave you with is one that staff feels is doable and not just in concept, but in reality. And so that took a little bit of time, but we had staff out on the street testing the routes that we presented a couple of months ago at this committee, and we've revised those routes since then, in addition to the recommendations we'll be talking about today. So I'll be going over all of that. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So today we're just going to do a very brief review of what I'm presenting today is the SRTP, the Short Range Transit Plan, which is included in your packet, and there's also a separate printed copy available if you want to take a copy of that as well. So we'll be reviewing the study process and findings, many of which we've already talked about at a previous meeting. And so I'm not going to dwell on that too long because I think we want to spend the bulk of the time today on what the final recommendations are for both the fixed route and the demand response, and how Fair and Piers thinks that Laguna Woods Village could implement all of those. Next slide. So as many of you know, I'm sure, we reviewed this a couple months ago. The process for the Short Range Transit Plan began with a community engagement session that was really successful and gave us a great deal of information for what we should be paying attention to and where we should focus our efforts. We also conducted rider and non-rider surveys over the course of the spring. A bus driver focus group, so I spent a good hour and a half or so on a Friday evening chatting with the bus drivers after they had finished their shifts and got some really good input, feedback, validation about some ideas and some different perspectives from behind the wheel. We conducted our technical analysis of data and also ride-alongs on the current routes to get a sense of, from our own perspective, what you all are experiencing on the buses. We developed our draft recommendations and made a presentation of the new fixed route concept a couple months ago at this committee. And then since that time, we've finalized the report, which is included in your packet, we're going over today. And we've been working with Francisco and Chris to refine the routes that we proposed and come up with a timetable that we think is going to work. And so there's a little bit of change to the routes that we presented a couple of months ago, but overall, the concept is largely the same. That's what we talked about. We'll get into some detail there. Next slide. So a lot of this will seem evident, but I think it's important to understand that for a short-range transportation plan to work, we need to review what are our assumptions going in, how do people feel about it, and just affirm, is all of this true? Is the perspective of the community true? Do we see it in the data? Do we see it on the street? So as we all know, many people who are here today and others who are not rely on the transportation program that Laguna Woods Village provides. It's essential. So we have a nice quote here from one of our outreach sessions. Somebody wrote us a note that said, "The bus system is essential and a good selling point to new residents." And we heard that many times from many different people, that this is really important and valuable. And so that's why we're here to address and try to make the system more efficient. But of course, what we heard is, although it's something people rely on, the current service design is not efficient for many of the most common trip types. So for certain people, depending on where you live in the village, you may be fortunate to have a relatively short bus trip to the grocery store, to a doctor's office, or to another clubhouse, but that's not true for many trips, and a lot of them require some kind of transfer or something else that may take a long time. So the fixed route service, the Easy Rider service design, is inefficient for a lot of the most common trip types that we have. Simultaneously, one of the big issues is that the Plan-A-Ride service, which is the other half of the transportation program essentially, can't effectively serve that same demand. And we'll get into details on what I mean by all of these as kind of a summary of our top-level findings that we want to address. And finally, the Plan-A-Ride service is provided on the weekends as the sole transportation program, and that's really insufficient for the demand on weekends, and we'll get into how we evaluated that. So I started with many people rely on the transportation program. So we surveyed people on board the bus and in the community via two different survey mechanisms to get both rider and non-rider perspectives. We received about 150 rider responses, And we know that many people are riding four or more days a week. And this is specific to the fixed route, although the data for Plan a Ride was a little bit different, but generally the same, that people who are using the service are using it on a regular basis, several days a week or more. Simultaneously, what we've seen is a shift in ridership that this is really a result of people being dissatisfied with the inefficiency of the routes. So this graph requires a little bit of explanation, but the summary on the left is the most important takeaway here. Veteran riders, people who have been riding the service for many years, are riding less often. And we see that in the ridership data, and we see it in the survey data, which is on the chart. But at the same time, there are new riders who are coming on board who didn't know the previous system and don't have something to compare against. And what we actually saw in the survey data was evidence to suggest that new riders are riding the same amount that our more experienced or veteran riders were. So it's actually a little bit unclear that there's a community perception that a lot of people have been riding a lot less as a result of the service change. But what I think is perhaps a more accurate summary is that a lot of people are very frustrated about the current service, and some people are riding less. And we want to address the frustrations, but it's really interesting. It's actually a little bit more of a mixed bag in the information than I think we expected. Next slide. But we do see trends over time based on ridership data showing that ridership declined after the service design was changed to the current Easy Rider and Plan a Ride. So that's an affirmation of something that we heard from many of the residents in our initial outreach, that many people are unable to make the same kind of trips that they were making under the previous service design, and ridership has declined following suit. The average has held relatively steady since the service change at the end of 2016, but it is quite a bit lower, as you can see on the chart. I also want to caveat this, that every community, every transportation system is different, is unique, but this is a trend that's happening across the U.S. So although it's specific to Laguna Woods Village, it's also kind of a national thing that we're seeing right now, where more people are driving and continuing to drive for longer and longer. So that's something to consider. So to summarize the issues of the fixed route, the current service design requires people to be on board the bus for a long time just to get to a transfer point to get to do many trips. And one of the big features there is that the current service design might facilitate you to run errands and go to shopping or doctor's appointments somewhat efficiently, but getting to and from a clubhouse that's not near your residence is actually very difficult. It can take a very long time. And then even if it's relatively quick, maybe from where you live to get to Stater Brothers or Big Lots, for example, depending on how long you are there doing your errands or whatever activity that you're trying to do, the limitation of the service is that it only operates once an hour. And so if your outing is not timed appropriately for that once an hour trip, you may end up being out in the community for quite a bit longer than you really want to, because you're waiting at least an hour for the next bus to return. As a result of the service design change in 2016, some service levels were shifted from the fixed route service to the demand response, which we call Plan a Ride. So demand response means somebody can call, schedule an appointment, and a vehicle will come and pick that person up and bring them directly to their destination. So direct service is a benefit to the individual, as we would discuss this pretty extensively in the report, that the direct service model, demand response, or Plan a Ride, is really beneficial to the individual, but it's much harder to deliver that level of service to many individuals. And there's a few things that are affecting that we'll get into in a moment. But what's happened is service shifted from the fixed route to the demand response service, Plan a Ride. The Plan a Ride service was opened up to be eligible to everybody in the community, as compared with the previous system, which was designed to provide transportation for people who had a disability that might make it difficult for them to use the fixed route system. Now anybody can schedule an appointment. So if it's open to everybody and it's better for every individual, that means more people are going to be interested in using that service instead of having to conform their transportation needs to the scheduled fixed route. What we've seen is that riders have shifted trips to Plan a Ride. And I want to take a step back for a moment. That slightly confusing bar chart that I was showing before, this is really where that community perception versus what we see in the data is really important. We think that actually there's many people who have shifted fixed route trips to Plan a Ride, but actually what's really going on is that there's many more people who are just using Plan a Ride who are new riders, who are not riding the system before. They may be new residents or they may be new to the service, but it's that combination weighted slightly towards newer riders on Plan a Ride that's causing Plan a Ride to be unable to accommodate the demand. So there's more requests for trips than Plan a Ride is able to accommodate each day. And what we see on this graph is just an example where we asked in the survey, if you've had trouble booking a trip, what were the reasons? And the most common, there's sort of a spectrum here, but the most common thing is that many people are experiencing the inability to schedule a trip 2 or more days in advance. And often you may not know 4 days in advance what you need to be doing on Thursday. So some people are getting in well ahead and planning for trips, and filling up the schedule quite far out. So what's happened as a result of the shift of Plan a Ride? Well, we have a limitation of the vehicles and drivers to meet demand. The individualized service would work if we had thousands of vehicles, but that wouldn't match with our allocation of resources for the transportation program. So we only have so many vehicles to provide service. We can only pick up so many people. The Plan a Ride service is also only really able to handle one person per vehicle per trip request, and that's partly a limitation of software and procedure right now. But even if we were to overcome the known issues with the Plan a Ride scheduling software and match up trips so that each Plan a Ride trip was maybe carrying more than one person, you really can't, there's no demand response system out there that can match up more than 2 or 3 people at a time. And so at best an hour, you're gonna carry maybe 5 trips with really, really good software and really good scheduling. And that just doesn't compare to the fixed route. Your fixed route service can carry dozens of trips per hour with people going all different directions. So we have a real limitation on Plan a Ride where this service is simply not comparable to fixed route, but there was a decision made several years ago to shift resources to Plan a Ride, and the service can't keep up with the demand. Finally, one of the major issues we mentioned in the initial summary was the weekend service that a further shift was made where the fixed route doesn't operate on the weekends, only Plan a Ride does. And so there are more Plan a Ride vehicles operating on the weekends. And you can see in the agenda packet today, the ridership breakdown by day of week. There are more Plan a Ride trips served on Saturdays and Sundays. That's because there's slightly more resources available because they're not operating fixed route. But that number is artificially low because there are more trip requests made for Saturdays and Sundays than Plan a Ride is able to handle. And so a lot of people are not able to take trips on the weekends that they otherwise would like to take. With a fixed route system, that wouldn't be a problem because we don't have enough demand that the fixed route system is overburdened. So on the weekend, what we saw in the data and what we saw in our surveys and from speaking with people individually at the outreach meetings is that the demand for service, particularly on Saturdays, is very similar to weekdays. There's an argument to be made that Sundays is somewhat less. The travel patterns on Sundays tend to be a little bit more oriented towards faith services in the morning, a little bit less activity throughout the day, and more dispersed origin destination people. Not as many people are going to Stater Brothers. There's a lot of people who are trying to get to services. So Sunday is a little bit of a different animal, and a lot of the feedback there comes both from the residents and from the bus drivers themselves, actually, that especially the veteran drivers who have been around for many years have said that Sundays are always a little bit more challenging. So and then in summary, there's a lot of trips essentially unserved, and we see that in the data from people not being able to request trips on Saturdays and Sundays, comments from residents saying that they weren't able to schedule a trip or that their trip wasn't served, and issues like that that we want to address. And I mentioned we did both a rider and a non-rider survey because I think it's important to understand how we can make a transportation system that works for the people who are using it currently, but also for the larger community. What we heard in the survey was, although 70% of the survey, the non-rider survey respondents currently drive themselves, almost the same proportion of respondents said that they expect to use the village bus system sometime in the future, and that many of them cited that as, I don't use the bus service today, but I chose to move here because the bus service exists. We have a quote here, I expect my ability to drive will become more restricted within the next few years. I'm sure that resonates with many people, that it's nice to have that freedom to be able to drive and be fully in control of all of your travel choices, but it's also really nice to have a system that works that you can rely on so that you can get out and spend time in the community and see your friends and get where you need to go. So there's a strong desire from both riders and non-riders for more frequent and more efficient routes, and that's coming right out of the survey data. What would motivate you to use the bus system even if you're not using it now? What do we need to address? And those issues really all fall down to what we've talked about here on the fixed route. The hourly fixed route service with the inefficient service design is not accommodating the needs of the community. The plan a ride service does address the frequent and efficient aspects for the individual, but once there's enough people looking for plan a ride service, it no longer works for the people behind them in line. So let's get into the meat of our recommendations. Again, this is slightly different from what we talked about, I believe, back in June. But I think, working with Chris and Francisco and the staff, we've been able to come up with a service design that's pretty similar. It hits on a lot of the same concepts, and we hope will be a big improvement. It will take some time to get used to if and when it is implemented. And there will be a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm very confident that this is going to be a major benefit to the community. So our recommendations are to implement a new service design that we'll get into in the next couple of slides. It's still an 8-route service design, so the current service is 8 routes, the new service is 8 routes, but they're 8 very different routes, and they're operating with 9 buses instead of 8 buses. So we're taking 1 additional bus to the fixed route, and one of those 8 routes is operating with 2 buses at the same time. And so they would be operating in opposite directions. We'll get into that a little bit. So as a result of the new service design, we're able to double the frequency from any point in the community to every 30 minutes instead of every hour. It still requires transfers, which is a system that has been in place and is essentially required in the way the community is laid out. There's really not a lot of opportunity to provide a really efficient route system without transfers. And we did not hear from anybody that requiring transfers is the problem. So we kept the concept of transfers and kind of reworked how that operates on the street. And finally, our recommendation is to operate the new fixed route service Monday to Saturday. And it is worth considering operating the fixed route service on Sunday, but the evidence that we have from speaking with the community and speaking with the bus operators and staff is that the Sunday travel demand, as I mentioned, is different enough that it probably could still be accommodated by a plan-a-ride style service, and that might be actually better because there's just so many more different destinations and less activity going to things like grocery stores and doctor's offices. So we think Sunday service can be addressed there, and when we get into the plan-a-ride recommendations in a few slides, we'll talk about how we can address some of those other concerns with plan-a-ride that might make you hesitant to say, let's have that on Sundays. So this is an overview of the community and the service areas. So it doesn't show the routes, it's just showing the areas that the routes are going to be primarily operating in. And we'll go through each route individually very briefly. And I know I'm moving quickly, but I'm happy to backtrack at the end and take any questions. So I mentioned it's an 8-route system. So you can see 6 numbered routes here. And then there's 2 other things, 2 other service areas here, commercial service areas and what I called wellness in the purple. So that would correspond with doctor's offices, dentists, optometry, the hospital, those sorts of things. So The main concept is very similar to what's provided today. Each neighborhood area that's identified on this map has one route that picks up when you walk outside of your home. There will be a bus that comes by on a schedule, and you don't need to know anything more than that to use the service effectively. You walk out and the bus will pick you up on the street out in front of your home, and it will bring you to a connection point where you can get to anywhere else in the community. And if you don't know how to get around, the bus operators will be able to direct you. And the concept is if you're in one of the numbered areas 1 through 6, those are the residential areas, those buses only serve residential areas. So if you want to go to a friend's home or you want to go to a clubhouse, you're using one of those routes, or if you're trying to get back to your own home, you're using one of those routes. If you're trying to do shopping or run errands or go to the DMV or come here to the community center, that would be on the commercial bus. And the commercial bus, there are 2 buses operating that route in opposite directions. And it only serves commercial destinations, so that bus does not go to any clubhouse. It doesn't go to any residences. Any clubhouse other than Clubhouse 1, which is the transfer point for everything. And finally, the wellness route we'll get into. That's one of the biggest shifts from the concept that we had last time. What we found was that the commercial route was too long to operate by itself within an hour. So we broke out all of the medical area around the hospital, and some of the other destinations that are a little bit further to the south into a separate route, a shorter route that should be able to accommodate that. So if we can go to the next slide here. So Route 1 begins at the towers and provides service through kind of the westernmost area, and then it runs directly over to Clubhouse 1 where you can transfer to any other route. Next slide. Route 2 is one that I think people will be particularly interested in. This route also starts at the towers, but this route provides a direct connection to Stater Brothers. So this is the only exception where we say the residential routes only serve residences. One of the things that we heard very loud and clear from the community during our engagement sessions was that some direct service for the towers would be really beneficial, and particularly what we heard is that Stater Brothers is by far one of the most popular commercial destinations that the bus service provides. So why not provide a route that provides a direct connection to Stater Brothers, so there's no transfer required. You can still transfer if you want to run more than one errand or you're out and about doing other things, but this route provides extra coverage for the towers and provides a more soon and direct connection to Stater Brothers. And sorry, I missed a beat on Route 1, but I'm sure you saw it on the slide. Route 1 serves Clubhouse 5 and 6. And so now we're looking at Route 3. So Route 3 serves more of the residential area and also would be your connection to Clubhouse 2 and 7. And as with all the other residential routes, connects in at Clubhouse 1. If you're paying close attention, you'll see there's a loop leg down to the south in through, I believe that's gate 3. And that is something that we were testing to try to provide some additional coverage through that area. So Francisco, that's still okay? That's still on the plan. So that's Route 3. Route 4 is the route serving Clubhouse 4, so it heads out from Clubhouse 1, crosses the street, covers that area by itself, and includes service to Clubhouse 4. Next slide. Route 5, this would be the one serving Clubhouse 3, and so this route, because it's in what I understand to be the kind of the original part of the community, there's a lot more residences in this area and much higher ridership. There's overlapping routes in this area to make sure that we have enough capacity on the bus to get people to their destinations. So you'll see this route is overlapping a little bit of one that we've already seen. Next slide. Route 6 provides service down to the very southeast portion of the community, and it doesn't actually cross any gates at all, so it's just Clubhouse 1 down to the south and back. And now the new, if we can go to the next slide, the new change here is to take one of the community routes, and what we've called it is the wellness route. I will certainly leave it in the community's capable hands. If you don't like the naming scheme, I won't take personal offense. We could call this Route 7 if you want, but the idea was to program a route that specifically serves the hospital area and the Taj Mahal and the Glass Building and many of the areas where I believe the current Easy Rider service provides on-request stops for many of those, and that can add a lot of time to certain routes. This was a concept to provide a more dedicated route that can serve those needs and will hopefully allow us to keep a lot of the other routes on schedule. Because one of the big concerns about this design is that it would be easy for the buses to get a little bit behind schedule, and we don't want. We want to make sure that we can provide reliable service all day. So this serves the medical offices and hospital area and a couple of other locations to the southeast that are on request, including the dental building and dental plaza and medical arts. Thank you, Francisco. And finally, the commercial route is largely the same as what we talked about last time. So this is the route that is being, there's 2 buses running opposite directions. So service on this route is still every 30 minutes, just like all of the other routes that we've talked about. And it serves all of the other destinations that are currently served by the Easy Rider that we haven't talked about. So this would include Moulton Plaza, it includes Stater Brothers, it includes Aldi, it includes the CVS and Mother's Market, it includes Trader Joe's. My understanding is that we'll probably have to continue to finagle things a little bit around the area where the mall used to be. Francisco's been working on that, but this is the current plan. And if we go to the next slide, when you put it all together, we have an 8-route system. It's similar in concept to what we are operating today, where each neighborhood area is served only by 1 bus, and there's a transfer system that's designed to be facilitated by the drivers. Most of the transfers are going to be happening at Clubhouse 1. That will be a little bit of a shift from the current system, where some transfers are happening within the community. If you want to get to what's called either East or West Commercial, that goes away. It gets shifted to Clubhouse 1, and the bus operators there will help you get to know which commercial bus you're getting on going in either the east or west direction from Clubhouse 1. Once we get used to this, I think savvy users will figure out that there's also other locations that you could transfer between routes, but the concept here is a single transfer point at Clubhouse 1 facilitated by the drivers. So by implementing a more efficient and effective fixed route system that allows people to get between neighborhoods roughly in 30 minutes, if you go from your residence to another clubhouse, for example, if you're trying to get to Clubhouse 4, you should be able to do that on the system in 30 minutes or less, depending on kind of where you live. And that includes with transfer time. And you should be able to get back. So you'll have 2 opportunities every hour to get back instead of the 1 now. So you can go visit programming somewhere else in the community. You can still make it to all of the same shopping destinations that you would before. So we really feel like the fixed route system is going to be quite a bit more efficient. And as part of that, we recommend, once we've got the fixed route system down, we should revise the Plan-A-Ride service, the policy and the scheduling practices for Plan-A-Ride, in order to ensure that people who really need that individualized door-to-door service because they have some sort of disability or some other need that precludes them from using the fixed route system, that there's enough capacity to serve those needs. What we don't want is people trying to make appointments 3 or 4 days ahead. And particularly people who really need some extra assistance getting to and from their door or the door of their destination, and not being able to make those trips because the schedule is full. And the only real option to resolve that is to make some changes to the Plan-A-Ride policy. And my understanding is it's actually a little bit more of a shift back to the system that, something similar to the system that was in place previously, where we prioritize Plan-A-Ride trips first for residents who have a disability or some other transportation need that precludes them from using the fixed routes. And our recommendation is that Plan a Ride could serve other trip requests as the schedule allows, but we would change the practice of scheduling trips so that we take in all of the requests for each day, and that towards the end of the day, build a schedule for the next day that is going to work, that follows this prioritization process first, and then we negotiate for anyone else that we can accommodate within that schedule. We negotiate their trip times to fit what the capacity allows, what the schedule and the vehicles allow. So that would involve some changes to how Plan a Ride schedulers operate their workflow. We need to develop and communicate the new negotiated schedule policy so that people understand when you request a trip, we will take that information in, and if you if you have a disability that precludes you from using the fixed route and you're the first person in line, then your trip is essentially guaranteed. If you're not the first person in line, we will get back to you before the end of the day and find a way to make that trip work, so that everybody is getting the service that they're requesting. And finally, improving the internal staff procedure and software so that ride matching becomes a possibility. Now, this has been a real hot button issue for the community. I think it's really important to know that even many of the largest transit agencies in the country do not have fully automated ride matching software. That does not exist. The only people who are able to do that is Lyft and Uber. And I tell you, if you are actually able to get inside their black box, it doesn't actually work as efficiently as they would have you believe. So it is fully automated, but there's no magic software solution for this. It has to be a combination of changes to practice and procedure at the staff level, and possibly some improvements to the software and the data that's available to the schedulers. Finally, there's a lot of other details that you'll see as you read through the report, but we heard a lot of other things in our outreach and in speaking with staff that we wanted to make sure are addressed. So there's some brief mention here, ensuring that staff and VMS are addressing the phone responsiveness issues, and it sounds like there may be some more recent particular troubles, but phone responsiveness is really important, and there's different ways that you can address that. And so we made some recommendations that Chris is already following up on. A shift in vehicle fleet. This is something that we were asked by the community a lot, but wasn't really originally identified as a need in the RFP. But we agree with a shift that Chris and his staff are already making, which is to use a different fleet for the Plan a Ride service that is a smaller vehicle, van type, because as I said early in the presentation, at best, Plan a Ride is not going to be able to serve more than a couple people at a time. There's just no way to match that many trips so that you're carrying a full bus load. So it makes sense to have smaller vehicles to the extent that that's practical. It's a balance issue that we leave to Chris and his capable staff, because you can't have two completely separate vehicle fleets, and there's a lot of times where you're just going to have to use what vehicles are available. And again, that's something that every transit service provider in the country deals with. You have to find the balance that works for your needs. Another thing here is consider a partnership with AgeWell Services for Plan a Ride. So what we want to do is address our internal issues with Plan a Ride in terms of the policy. So who can use Plan a Ride, who gets priority for Plan a Ride, and can we accommodate anybody else afterwards? But then there's also just the fundamental question of, there are other agencies out there, some of which we're familiar with, like AgeWell Services, who provide transportation services to eligible clients of theirs who live in the community. They probably have a better capability of doing the dispatching and scheduling software issues that Laguna Woods Village has been dealing with, because that's their business. And so we had one initial discussion with them a few months ago that I facilitated, in which we talked with them a little bit about what a partnership might look like, wherein AgeWell Services could provide some or all Plan a Ride. And at this time, we are not making any recommendation to Laguna Woods Village on what that looks like, because there's a lot there to unpack in terms of contracting and requirements from the village's standpoint. But Our main recommendation is continue to explore that as an option because AgeWell or some other health and human service transportation or non-emergency medical transportation provider can probably do as good or better at a service like Plan a Ride. And that may be a really significant benefit if everything else lines up, that they can provide more effective scheduling and dispatch. Finally, the report closes with recommendations on how to monitor the implementation of the new fixed route and Plan a Ride service. So one of the things that we came up against in the development of the study was, do we have good enough data to really say conclusively what has changed over time between the different service options? And so ridership is currently tracked, but we don't really have a way to track transfers between routes very effectively. We don't have a good way to track where people are actually getting on and off. We could do it manually, but the system that you currently use where people tap their card to get on the bus records an ID, so we can have a sense for how many different IDs are being used and how frequently people are riding. But we don't really get a good sense for where they're riding to and from, and that information is very valuable because it can help us continue to refine service over time to make sure that there's enough service in the areas where there's high demand, and that in areas where there's lower demand, maybe we shift to request-only service or plan-a-ride only service. So without better data, it's very difficult to answer those questions in the future. And one of the things that I think is most important is if you're going to make this much of a shift in what you're providing for transportation service, you want to make sure that you're evaluating how that goes so that you can respond to your early shakeout period, but also continue to refine it over time. So that was probably longer than I think, but a pretty fast review of what's in the report. I'm happy to stop there and take questions, and we can backtrack through any particular slides.
Want to go through the cards just for the people? Do we have to go board first?
We don't have any cards for this.
Are we going board first?
So we're doing this for speakers?
Well, I think that we need to go first. No. That is at the end with us wellness deal. Okay, right, we'll do you guys first and see what goes on. In the meantime, we'll give them time to set it up. Okay, start. John?
Two quick questions just so I have the foundation here. Number one, thank you for all that information. It's pretty extensive. First question is for Chris, though, just so I make sure I understand this correctly. The report says there's 8 fixed routes on our current system. But when I look at our map on the color coding, I can only count 6, and if I jerry-rig it a little bit, 7. So can you help me identify just the different, we don't have to walk through every one of them, but I mean, if you take a look at the map on page 3, there's orange. And does each one represent one bus? That's my question for you. So I can kind of get a feel for what's currently going on.
To the answer to the question is, one of the routes, the commercial route, will be taken care of by 2 vehicles.
Is that the east route and the west route? So
Yes.
it's-
Oh, existing is only 8 buses.
Right, but that's 2. Okay, then I see on the far left of the map, there's an orange route, let's call that 3. Green route, call that 4.
Which page you looking at?
Page 3.
Oh, okay. You're looking at 4 different neighborhoods, and every single neighborhood, it has 2 buses in service, the east and the west. So if you count the neighborhoods, it's 4 times 2 is 8.
And then which of those buses run the east and the west route? All of them?
4 of them do east and 4 of them
Got
do
it.
west.
Okay, thank you. And then, is it Jeremiah? Okay, question for you is, what is the strategy outlined in the plan for Gate 11?
That will be a request stop, depending on the usage from that particular gate. It's no different from what we have right now in place.
Well, in the new drawing, there's no service outlined for Gate 11.
Yeah, that's correct. We didn't draw the current route to serve Gate 11. It could be served on request, as Francisco said, under the same design that it currently is. Our understanding from staff is that the Gate 11 area is very minimally used, if at all. And so trying to simplify our presentation today, we wanted to focus on the areas where the proposed routes are going to be operating on a regular basis. We did not include every possible request stop on the current, on the proposed service design, but there will be some stops that are currently on request and will remain available on request.
So if I understand you right, on the fixed routes, if anybody from Gate 11 wants to use them, they have to find a way into the drawing that you've put together for the 6?
No,
the
just
new
the same
routes?
as today, somebody from Gate 11 would call the transportation program to ask for the next bus to come through and pick up.
Is that how we're set up? The map indicates that it's already on like a circle, like they go through and run through it anyway. They do not?
In the current system, Route 1E goes in there on request. So far, that particular route doesn't service that many because the residents, they don't require the service. But at any time when they call the transportation, they will be dispatched with a bus.
So you don't send a fixed route into Gate 11 unless somebody calls it?
Unless it's requested.
Thank you.
Judith, I believe you were next, or did you?
No, I just,
Hey, we'll start over there.
I believe the report is very good. It helps those of us who have been campaigning for about 4 years to get back to a fixed route schedule. I hope we do that because it will be helpful for everyone, including the towers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead. Elsie.
Thank you, Chairman Gross. Right, whoops. Thank you, Chairman Gross. I was wondering I'm looking at the map on page 21, and it looks like there's some overlapping of the commercial with some of the, well, there is, some of the neighborhood buses. So I was wondering, like, will they pick people up? Like, like if there's any benches or any stops along, what I'm trying, okay, I'm in 4, and I don't mean to just make it about me, but it just makes a better example. So could I like walk out to El Toro Road and pick up a commercial bus that was passing by, assuming it was going the right direction? I mean, is that going to be a possibility?
Yes.
Or not?
It's going to be something like we have in service right now on the fixed routes. Any bus leaving the Gate 1, if they're going to be passing by OCTA benches, yes, we have to
Oh, so they
accommodate.
will stop at OCTA
Yes.
benches, and you have to give them the old high sign, right?
Yes, just the usual thing that the residents are doing right now, raising up the
Yeah,
pass.
no,
and
that's really
request-
neat, though. I just
Yes.
noticed that because there's several overlappings there, so that would be a real, like you said, savvy drivers.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you very much. I
The
really
the
think it
important
looks
thing on
great.
this is that residential is going to focus only on residential. It's not
Exactly.
going to have to do nothing with the commercial part because it will get confusing.
And none of those gym guys. Thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Frankel?
Kurt and Francisco, I'm concerned about cancellations. The page 1 of the staff report mentions cancellations and says that there's a high percentage, and the chart shows on page 4 that there is a high percentage of cancellations. And the report addresses on page 23 the possibility of developing a hardline policy in that regard. I'm thinking, what is the cost of the cancellations? And should we recommend staff develop a hardline policy that we keep track of those cancellations, and with residents with a history of such will then lose their privilege?
Yeah, as it relates to the cancellations, right now, our initial finding is some of those are being caused by our current software program. People will respond, and much like Larry brought up earlier, they'll sign up for one, and they get 2 responses in their email with 2 different cancellations. So some of those cancellations are software issues. Others, though, you're exactly correct, as it relates, can be handled through tightening up some of our policies as it relates to Plan-A-Ride. I think some of the things that Jeremiah said, by refocusing Plan-A-Ride back to the old, what we used to call the lift system, which was geared more towards those that need medical assistance, will help eliminate some of the cancellation problems we're having.
What is the cost of the cancellations, Can you figure that out? And how does it impact the efficiency? How do the cancellations impact the efficiency of our system?
Well, for what I would call those true cancellations, where somebody makes the appointment and then cancels last minute, I don't have a dollar figure for you, but it obviously affects our scheduling person's time. They spend roughly, potentially up to 10, 15 minutes making sure that the schedule is done. And if the cancellation, it gets to the driver, doesn't get to the driver before the route, and they arrive and there's nobody there, that's obviously an impact there. But right now, there's no way to know how many cancellations of each kind happen.
Would you recommend that this committee develop a hardline policy with regard to cancellations?
Yeah, and when we meet on the 29th to kind of provide my staff recommendations based on what Jeremiah is doing, that'll be one of the things we discuss.
Thank you.
And we'll go, then after that, it goes before the GRF board, because we can make the recommendations, but they may have to make the approval of it and such. John will be with you in just a second. And it's very important to understand that we can make the suggestions and make the request after staff gives it to us, but it has to be done the proper way through the board. And that will certainly be addressed. That's been mentioned several times. John, you're next again.
Okay, thank you. Probably the most surprising thing that I saw in the report was the surveys. And both people, if I understood it right, there was a survey done among people who claim to use the system, and then others that you kind of went out to the community to get information. And across the board, it was 20% or less that claimed they understood the current bus system and how to use it. And so I guess the question I'm curious about, I didn't see any conclusions drawn on how to improve that number. And do you feel like improving that might improve rider satisfaction without having to make any changes at all? I think that might be question one. Question two is, what's to say we make all these changes and you've built a much better mousetrap, but we have the same user understanding, we end up with no better improved satisfaction?
Yeah, great. Some great things to think about there. I'm not quite sure that statistic of 20% understanding is totally accurate. I think the people who are non-riders, I believe about 20% of them feel that they understand the current service even if they don't really use it. Current riders, generally, their comprehension of the service is very high. And what we found was we asked what would help people feel comfortable using the system if they don't use it. And one of the options was getting a better understanding of using the bus service. And so that was a fairly popular, that's another number that I think was probably in the 20s. I don't have it directly in front of me, but that was something where we felt it would be valuable for VMS to continue to do educational outreach opportunities, and there's some recommendations for how to do that, and there's some that they are doing or have done in the past that we feel should be utilized, especially as we roll towards a new system. So there's some ideas about having community meetings like at the towers or at clubhouses to just provide a presentation of here's what the service is and here's how to use the service. One of the things that we found in our initial outreach meeting months ago, many people attended were hoping that it was a presentation on how to use the bus system. They didn't understand that it was a presentation where we were looking for feedback. They were coming because they wanted to be educated. And so I think that is a very important thing, that we don't put a service out that no one understands. To your question about how much would education on the current system improve the effectiveness of the current system, we might be able to get more people to use the current system who don't right now by providing better education, but that doesn't resolve the factual issues with the current system, which are that it's not an efficient use of 8 buses. There's a lot of duplicative movement on those 8 buses that are currently operating, and really it's not mindful of what people need, which is I want to leave my home and get to somewhere quickly and then be able to get back from there in a comparable amount of time. And one of the main issues with the current service design is you have a short travel time on one end and a very long travel time on the other. And the proposed system is trying to balance that so that they're medium length trips on both ends. So I'm hopeful that with some of our recommendations and some of the stuff that we've talked with Chris and others about, we can continue to do some education for the community, and that the new system will not just be a success for the riders who are currently unhappy with the current system, but that we'll be able to encourage more riders to come on board.
Yeah, we have been talking. Chris and I do a lot of talking, staff does a lot of talking, and we've really discussed this because after what we say here today will be over people's heads in some cases. So if we can make presentations with paperwork to back it up at these town hall meetings, perhaps it will stay. And that's exactly what we've been talking about and trying to get going. But here again, we have already going forward, then this presentation will be given to GRF at the point in time as well, so that we can get it done right. Okay? Good. I hope that answers, John. It does. Thank you.
I have one further question. We were told that the cost of the 7-day-a-week fixed ride schedule was $500,000, and it didn't really get off the ground. Do we have a cost of this system? Of this proposal?
We're in the process of costing it out now, and at the meeting on the 29th, I'll be breaking it down exactly for you, how much this would cost, how much the revised plan a ride would cost on a per ride basis. That's kind of the detail I was going to be getting in on the 29th.
Thank you.
I believe we'll be getting a lot of information today to come forward for the 29th meeting, which will be of extreme importance to us, especially with the folks going to be making the presentations to us. So we are looking forward to that, okay? Thank you, Franco.
What time?
I'm sorry.
On the 29th, what time?
Oh, okay.
Is that October 29th,
It just says October 29th right now. We don't have it set up.
I think it's 1:30.
Yeah, we'll be making it at 1:30. I just need to verify on the calendar, but most likely it'll be 1:30 to 3:30 on the 29th.
But we have to make arrangements with staff to get it done right. Okay? Judy, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. He answered everything.
Don?
If I can get this turned on. Yeah, the Plan a Ride program was originally started for residents who needed the extra help, I believe. And over the years, other people called in, and now it's open for anyone, and it's really created a problem. How, and you suggested now that you are going to let those who really need it go in first? Or set up a schedule first, and then others, as room is provided or something?
Yeah,
How would you do that?
Discrimination. At a basic level, what you do is you accept all trip requests over the course of the day, just the same way that we currently do. But the policy would be that people whose disabilities preclude them or make it difficult for, and that's some determination that the village is going to have to make. But people who qualify for or are qualified for prioritization on Plan a Ride would be guaranteed service, and that anybody else, if they are looking for service, would be tentatively on the schedule. And at the end of the day, the schedulers would go through the whole schedule and make sure that all the people who get priority have an appointment time as close to their original request as possible. And anybody else that can be accommodated would be accommodated within the bounds of the schedule. So many agencies do this with their demand response system, where they will take all the trips in for the day, and then they will negotiate the final trip time within a window that they define by policy, and then they set the actual delivery of service schedule for the following day. So by 5 o'clock today, the schedulers would know what's supposed to be provided for service the following day.
I'm not, well, I have a follow-up question on that.
No, I want to. Just 1 minute. You'll have your time.
Answer him.
You have to wait for him.
There will be residents who will call in and said, I'm disabled, I need help, just for a day or two. Can you pick me up first? And in reality, there's nothing wrong with them. How would you control that?
Well, there's a few different ways that Laguna Woods Village can choose to address that. I would say transit agencies that are actually providing paratransit under the Americans with Disabilities Act have very specific guidance on how to address that. Those requirements do not necessarily apply here. But they're a good model to follow, I would say. So that's been our recommendation to Chris and his group, is to take a look at those best practices that transit agencies follow and implement those. So to answer your question, people who need additional assistance have to go through some sort of qualifying program. If it's temporary, there are ways to go through a short-term qualification process where you can just talk to them over the phone and set a limit on how long that is, where they would be allowed to be provided service before they have to go through the regular evaluation. You know, and we can get more into detail there.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Williams?
Again, I said last month that that wasn't the way Plan a Ride had been. Again, Plan a Ride was originally, before the changes, was from 8 to 9 and 6 to 10. We had, what you're saying, a medical lift bus that we already have been qualified by Laguna Woods for the lift bus, which is for medical and people of medical necessity. We have that list. Where it is, I don't know. But Plan a Ride was not open for everyone to call in. It was only 2 different times of the day, and the rest of the day was the lift bus. So what they told you is not correct, how Plan a Ride had been established. And so what you're saying is that we need to go back to the lift bus and that list, and then do Plan a Ride some other type of way, because the medical people and anyone with medical issue already has been okayed.
Yeah, I think there's a few options here. What we have as a recommendation in the report is a little bit more of a blend of the current style Plan a Ride and the previous lift bus, where the lift bus was available only to people who had a medical necessity or some sort of disability. Our recommendation is we think you can accommodate both by prioritizing the people who need it first, and that other people would be allowed service on a first come, first served basis as the schedule allows. But certainly, it's up to the community. If you choose to just go back strictly to the lift bus, that's kind of one extreme, or you could continue to operate Plan a Ride as open to everybody and just allow the schedule to be full when it fills up. So I think that's the spectrum of options, and our recommendation is to kind of shoot for the middle.
Okay, down. We'll go to the community.
Sue Ellen.
Thank you very much for explaining that in that detail. The part I don't see at all is the evening bus. That's when people go to clubhouses for activities. They also maybe go shopping too. But our bus system used to be geared for whoever needed to go to Clubhouse 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever activity. So they didn't use the same system in the evening that they used for the fixed routes during the day. I didn't really hear if that's included somehow in there, that you have a different population, and definitely if you have a group of people going, how to put them together so they can all go to Clubhouse, whatever, for the same event.
Do it. We don't have that specific addressed in the report. What I would say is our our feeling is that the evening demand, including your example of small groups of people trying to get to and from clubhouses, should be able to be accommodated by Plan a Ride if the other elements of Plan a Ride are addressed, which would include changing how we do the scheduling, changing the software, potentially partnering with AgeWell. So it's not a single, there's not a single item that is going to resolve that need. I think it's a combination of a few different strategies.
To answer the question, Ms. Luana, the B-Bus, that's the old system. It will be the same like right now, but still Plan a Ride. It will be from 5 to 10:30 at night. So people will have to call and make reservations as usual, and they will be accommodated up to 3 p.m., which is the cutoff time, so it allows us to run the schedule and get it set for the day.
So 3 o'clock will be the call-up time, and when will we get called back as to which time will be picked up?
Just like we did before in the past.
Okay, going back to the past. Thank you.
Yes.
See, Sue Ellen, this is why this is great. We're bringing forth information. Staff is now apprised of it, and that's why a lot of this will be brought up again at the 29th meeting, because we're getting more input, and we'll be able to look at things much, much better, okay? Thank you. Next, please.
Bert Moldo.
And good afternoon. A couple of questions. First, do we have a callback system for confirmation when somebody calls for Plan a Ride? I know my dentist and my doctor, 24 hours before, calls me and tells me, you know, it's a reminder that I have an appointment. And if we don't have that, do you think that might be a solution to part of the no-shows? That's the first question.
Right now, no, we do not have a phone callback system. Right now, it's done through
Yeah,
email.
either that or
That's something
messaging or
that they're recommending that we take a look at.
Okay, because I didn't hear any comment on that.
Yeah.
Secondly, when I take a look at the diagram, we right now have an assembly point at Clubhouse 1, but when you really look at the diagram, the ideal assembly point would be where the City Hall is and where Aldi's is, that big parking lot. Have any consideration been given to that as the assembly point? Did anybody talk to the city to see if that would be an available location?
Why would they change?
I agree that something more central would make a lot more sense for the service design and would be more efficient, but we were not, I guess in part of our study was not to look at alternate sites that are not owned by Laguna Woods Village, so we'll have to leave that to staff to explore in the future. I think for now, Clubhouse 1 is well designed to handle transfers, so even though it's a little bit lopsided, it's still the best place to do it safely and comfortably.
Right, because, you know, there is an issue here where if we begin to do any construction on Clubhouse 1, either renovation or tear down and rebuild, we're going to have to look for another point anyway, okay? So I think that's something that we have to consider as an alternative then. Thank you.
Elsie, you had something to say on that?
Yeah, okay, so now we have another meeting on the 29th, and then you just wondered if you folks from transportation, do we have any idea of like when we might actually initiate this great new program, which looks really good, and I want to get on it?
Good question.
My timetable right now is to go to this group on the 29th, immediately take it to GRF in November to get the GRF to approve in November, take November and December to go over those training things, to do those town halls, to educate the community, to work out the details, and then start at the beginning of the year sometime in January. That's my plan right now.
I made mention of that at the board meeting, that this would be implemented at the beginning of 2020. I mentioned that yesterday on the board meeting.
Not at my board meeting, you didn't,
I was
right?
at the GRF board meeting for everybody. I made that note.
I apologize, I wasn't there.
Well, listen to it. Yes, Judy.
I just wanted to answer Bert. Last time I did a Plan a Ride, they have a text messaging confirmation. I got confirmation, and it even tells you where you're going. And so I don't know, did they discontinue that? Did they discontinue that? Because that's
For some reason, when we started the service on providing emails, phone calls, depending whatever was on the resident database, it raised a lot of complaints to the fact that we were eating up the data plan
Oh.
from some of the residents.
Interesting.
So we have to stop and minimize the use of that.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
See, that's good to know.
Yeah.
You got the answer, okay. Next, please.
David Kay.
Can I talk from here? Am I talking loud enough?
No.
I can hear. I don't know about the rest of them. I hear.
4 or 5 of us have hearing aids, we can't hear too well, let's get up close.
We use telecoil holders directly connected to the mic.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to express my congratulations on this revised schedule. I think it's got excellent chance of working versus this east-west that we're currently working with. But my personal issue is communications. The last time I attended a meeting, I had some points that I raised, and the one is still a major problem. I can use the scheduled bus. However, I have to call in to get the bus to come into my cul-de-sac. And I'm 25% of the time, I don't get the bus because I'm waiting more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes for someone to answer the call. I'm waiting to get one east on the next hour or whatever it is. So I suggested at the last meeting I was at, and I think it should be something for just the scheduled bus. If you want to request pickup, or if you're out at Home Depot or Rite Aid or whatever, and you want a bus to pick you up, that you have a separate phone number which is answered within 5 minutes. That way, we know if we're going to get picked up and when, and it's not going to interfere with anything else. But I think the new system, once you've implemented, that's going to reduce a lot of the phone calls you're getting, but I still feel you need a separate phone number so that you can get through within 5 minutes to make a request stop, either pick up or drop off or whatever. That's my main thing today. Thank you.
That note has been taken and will be considered, sir.
Jeannie Rudy.
Hi, thanks for presenting the report. With regard to, and I'm legally blind, but I have some vision, and I'm profound hearing loss. So I don't know who made the comment about cancellation. Last Saturday, I go to the Braille Institute every Friday and other times during the week. Last Saturday, I was able to make appointments. So I called for 20 minutes, over and over and over. And it comes back and goes right to voicemail. Well, I've learned the very hard way, you never leave a voicemail because you never get a call back because they're too busy and shorthanded. So I looked at my phone and it was like 14 times I tried to call before I got a service. I requested my time and then I got the email. Then yesterday or the day before, I got 2 cancellations. I only have 2 rides this week. So this morning I called 9 times. It went, please leave a voicemail, hang up, please call back, please. 20 minutes later, I got someone. I'm assuming those cancellations had something to do, and that's what she said. She said, well, the way the system works, we put you in. I had 3 for one time and 2 for another time. So what they did is they sent out cancellation. But in the meantime, that leaves me frustrated last night wondering, have my rides been canceled? They're very busy times. I have to call 7 days in advance. You call 5 days in advance, sorry, we can't take you. So something's wrong with the phone system. and maybe like David said, a different phone number or something. There's no more you're on hold. I think if the scheduler is busy, it automatically goes to voicemail. And I've been using this system for about 18 months. And I've maybe in the very beginning had a couple callbacks, but I never get any callbacks. I've even been stranded. I talked to supervisors, all kinds of people. Nobody called me back. Finally, they sent a fixed bus route driver to come and get me, but that was 2 hours after my scheduled ride. I was getting ready to walk home, and I have very bad vision for walking home. So under the new guidelines, I don't think I'm going to be eligible for Plan a Ride because I take the fixed route as much as I can because the drivers are tremendously helpful and help me get where I need to go and which spot. So because the way I understand it, Plan a Ride will only be for people who can't take the fixed route under the new recommendations. I may be on the fixed route more. I am access qualified, and I do take access. So something I think just needs to improve is the phone system. I know they're shorthanded. The schedulers are awesome. The drivers are tremendous. I have no complaints about that. The Plan a Ride drivers are pulling their hair out trying to accommodate everybody, and they're shorthanded. So that's just my comment. And I'm looking forward to I use the bus almost all the time. If I don't ride it for a couple of days, the drivers say, "Where have you been? Are you okay?" So I appreciate the service, and I will continue to use it. And it's why I moved here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Could I make a comment to her, please? You're always supposed to call security if you get stranded. And I would say that would probably be even during the day. If she gets stranded and she can't get home, you're supposed to call security, and they're supposed to take care of it. That's right. Is that right?
Yeah, that's been mentioned time and time again, and yet people don't do that. You're right. It's a situation where this, again, where the town hall meetings may be of great value with the exact information that you folks are putting out. Thank you. Judith?
I just want to say, since this is being videotaped, for the sake of the audio on the videotape, could you repeat what her comment was for people watching the video at a later date? What she said? That if you get stranded somewhere, the policy
Supposed
is
to call- yeah,
call
if you're
security.
stranded somewhere, you're supposed to call security for assistance. So now that the community will see that on television. Thanks, Judith. It's a good idea. Because they may not have heard you from being over there, dear.
Larry?
Yeah, I'd like to address John's concerns about education. Number one, we have a TV station here which can put out a lot of information. And more than that, I have told Chris that if this new program is instituted, that I would be willing to spend time, and I've had a number of other people tell me that they would be glad to join me in spending time at Clubhouse One or wherever and answer questions from residents to explain the new system. You live where? You want to go where? This is how you do it. You don't have to bother the bus driver. You can ask us, and we can do this for days and days. It wouldn't even need a town hall meeting, which costs money. You could do it with volunteers. And I even have volunteers that told me they would do it in Chinese or other languages. So if people have questions about how to use the new system, if this system is indeed installed, then that's the way to do it. Use the volunteer. Don't be looking at spending more money for town hall meetings or responding some other way, but that way and the use of the television station, I think will answer your question.
Well, Larry, you brought a good point. However, you have to consider, if you're advising someone and it's wrong, happens to be wrong information, then there's a lot of challenges there. Whereas if we set up a town hall meeting, I can go to the town hall meeting with the information provided. it should be done by staff, so to speak, so that if there's any kickback, then we get raised a heck with, so to speak. This, and I understand what you're saying, you're trying to be a volunteer and do the right thing, but again, we have to go with what we are allowed to do as well. Question, John?
First of all, thank you very much for that comment. That's phenomenal that you'd step up like that. My comment was driven by the fact that it's clear we need something. And, because the data just supports that we're not getting the information on how to most effectively use even our current system. If we're about to improve it, everybody should, be excited about hearing about it. So my only addition to the comment would be, we have a really excellent communications and marketing director in Eileen Paulin, and hopefully we can coordinate with her and build a program that would involve what you're saying, and everybody else.
Yeah.
In addition to you, Ray.
I understand, yeah.
No, I'll answer your question also, because I think that those of us that ride the buses know how to use it more efficiently than you do, or you do, or you do, because we ride them all the time. And if people have a question and that you're thinking I'm giving out the wrong information because staff should handle it, I think that's just, generating more time for you that you don't need. Vashti?
Okay, thank you, Larry. Some time ago, it was Bus Buddies, and what you said, that was what that program was supposed to be about. Now, what happened to that, I don't know. But like Larry's saying, a lot of people that's there, they turn around and do ask us. And all they have to do, in our last sentence, say, confirm that with the driver. And so, again, I don't know what happened to the Bus Buddies, and that's what
That's
you
what
are
it's all
asking
about.
about.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry.
No more speakers.
Whoop, got one that's coming up.
What happened to the Bus Buddies?
What happened to the bus buddies? They rode the buses, and they got tired.
Oh, they got
And they
Might
kinda
address
dis-
your name so that they have it down
I'm
as
sorry.
well. We know who
I'm
you
Joan
are.
Milliman, 9693E. I was a bus buddy,
Oh.
but the bus buddies kind of disappeared. Too many meetings, whatever happened. My suggestion in combination with what Larry's saying is to establish some kind of a booth, either out of the drop-in lounge or separate booth that is a bus information booth with a person, certain hours of the day, not all day, but certain hours of the day where riders could get some practical help. And it's possible to use volunteers who have been trained by staff. So we could still use staff, but not use staff in got it. You got it, Chris.
Right, volunteers.
See, this is why, like at the traffic court, I asked that we had DMV notifications up front and all kind of information. And in fact, I'm going to ask, we've got a whole bunch of these papers still left over there. I'm going to ask that they be put at the front desk because I'm sure people are going to start coming in and want to know what this was all about. So we're not throwing those away, I can guarantee. That's French from Louisiana.
Good.
You're laughing at me.
No more speakers.
No other questions? Anybody else got anything else to say? And you want to take over, Chris? Go ahead.
I didn't understand the 9th bus.
Didn't understand?
You said it was gonna be 9 buses. I
Oh.
didn't understand the 9th bus.
Yeah, sorry. It's there are 8 routes and 9 buses. So one of those 8 routes is being operated by 2 buses because the route is long enough that in order for it to be every half hour, there needs to be 2 buses running at the same time. So the commercial bus the commercial route is the one operated by 2 buses. And if you were standing at Stater Brothers, there would be a bus every half hour.
Oh, to bring back to Clubhouse 1.
Exactly.
To
yep.
bring us back to Clubhouse 1.
Exactly, yep. And so if you're at Clubhouse 1 at the hour, there will be 2 commercial buses there. One would be going towards Stater Brothers and one would be going towards Trader Joe's.
Okay, I'll just have one more thing and then Chris will take over. I like page 3 on the community perspective, and people definitely should read it. This shows exactly what the community has asked for, and they have followed up. They have really followed up with what's going on. They had meetings with people from various locations, people who rode the buses, people who didn't ride the buses. You asked to have the bus drivers talked into. They were all there. And then the company went out and rode the buses and made sure of what you're asking them to do is being looked into. And I think, that, like I say, this one page alone says an awful lot. Thank you very much. Chris, you got the next part, please.
Just to finalize, I wanted to thank everybody for their ideas on education and for people bringing it up, because in order for this to work, we have to have an extensive education program. All the stuff that you guys brought up, we're going to be doing. I've already been talking with Eileen in marketing about it. Staff is working on revising the Bus Buddy program again. We're going to be doing everything we can to educate the community, plus some of the ideas that I heard today that I didn't think of, but that's why we're here, to bring up more ideas. So when I was asked about the schedule of implementation, I wish that I could start this tomorrow, but if I start this tomorrow, it's not going to work. I have to take the time to put it together, take a few months, educate the residents on how this works, so when we kick it off, it'll be a successful program. And so that's what we're committed to do, and I'm excited about this happening.
Okay, then we're now at the next item, which is items for future agendas. Please, Chris.
The big one, I keep on pushing this back a little bit, and I apologize, but it's very important that, and I'll be bringing this to the next meeting. We've been working very extensively with the legal counsel here in terms of developing an ADA policy. We still do have 3 of our buses that were purchased through grants that we are complied to be with the ADA policies, but we don't have that in writing. I was this close to bringing it to this meeting, but one of the attorneys just had another question on it, so that's something I'll be bringing to the board, then ultimately GRF, to make sure that we're complying for those 3 buses with the ADA policies. And plus, with the implementation of this, like Jeremiah said, there's going to be policy decisions that, as a board, we're going to have to make, and I'll be bringing those up over the next few meetings.
Okay, we're at the next thing, committee meeting comments. Committee member comments. Zoe, Elsie?
Well, yes, I think this was a very good meeting, and I think it helps to explain some of the frustrations that some of us members have encountered for the last 4 or 5 years when they went away from the fixed bus schedule. Because I still feel firmly that the fixed bus schedule is still the best policy here, because no matter what age you are, whether you're disabled or not, there are times when sometimes the doctor calls you and says, I cannot see you today, and you've already made arrangements under the plan of ride. Therefore, the fixed bus schedule allows that person to say, okay, I know that the buses come here at a certain time every day, and I can make my appointment when it's rescheduled. So let's keep that in mind, and I thank you very much.
Elsie?
I just got a couple words for you. Fixed routes forever. And soonest. And thank you for everything that you do, you guys, and you too, Mr. Gross.
Thank you.
No further comment.
John?
I was just going to tell Joshua, I'm overwhelmed with the thoroughness of your report. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
I have a comment on something that one of our guests brought up, is waiting on the phone. The thing has to ring and ring and ring, and he never gets an answer. I'm not sure how you correct that. Unless you hire 2 or 3, 4 more people, and we're not going to do that, we don't have the money. And then Joe Milliman said something about getting guests to come in, or volunteers. That might be a way.
In August.
You know?
Well, they said it in
I
August.
hate waiting on the phone and then finally getting something and we're never getting an answer, and it happens. I'm sorry. Aggravating.
Yeah, that was brought up in August, but I guess no one never got back with the lady, and no, it hasn't went any further. That maybe some of us, myself too, would volunteer to work with the dispatchers.
Yeah, I agree.
Elsie also.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever happened to that?
They brought it up in August. Nobody never answered
So
it.
whatever happened to that? That
Yeah.
great idea?
What happened to it?
Future agenda.
Well, it was there in August.
Well, let's not forget about it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's make that a future agenda item, really get into it.
Okay.
We have a lot of people who would love to volunteer. They could learn the system.
Okay, that's about the end of it. The next meeting, like I said, is going to be on the Tuesday, October 29th. And our regular next meeting is going to be December the 4th, 2019. Thank you very much.
I got a question. The October, that's open to the residents?
Yes.
Oh, and I had a last comment. I just wanted to comment, and since this is being televised, and these people that's rude to the drivers and the dispatchers, it would be nice if they took a chill pill, because we need these people. And people getting cussed out and leaving and don't want to work here, that's terrible, because these drivers and dispatch, it isn't their problem, it's GRF concern. And so please be nice to them. No profanity.
Thank you. That's good report. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.